Hello, hello, and welcome back to For Book's Sake. I'm Heather Roberts.
I am Veronica Adams, and we are 1852 Media.
Indeed. And today we are going to be talking about book banning. And I know there's a big legal case going on right now that we should all be paying attention to.
Yes.
And so we are here to make you pay attention to it.
Yeah. In full disclosure, I have a decal on the back of my car that says read banned books. So that's what you're going to get from me today. Let me just put 100%. That out there now.
Right. I mean, we are in the book publishing industry. We take free speech and, freedom of expression very seriously.
Yes.
And believe pretty much that you should be able to do what you want with your freedom of expression and writing.
Absolutely.
There are certain circumstances where it might be, that there should be regulations put on. Obviously, we don't want, retailers. We understand retailers' boundaries regarding certain types of literature, if you will, if you want to even call it that. But these book bans, as we're calling them, that we're not talking about extreme situations here where your mind just went. We're not talking about that.
Yeah.
In this particular case, we're talking about books being in school districts, being available for being checked out.
Yes.
So we're not forcing anyone to read these books. They're just on the shelves, available for circulation.
No one's going to school and getting assigned these books as mandatory reading. They're just part of the public library collection.
Yes. That you can check out as a student.
Well,
I mean, depending
not in Escambia County, Florida, you can't.
No, not in Escambia County, Florida, you can't. And that is the subject of this lawsuit. So this is PEN America Center, Inc., et al., which et al., for those that don't know, means and others.
Including Penguin Random House.
Yes. Versus the Escambia County School Board. Yes. It is a federal case, and it was filed in the Northern District of Florida, Pensacola Division. Mm-hmm. It was filed back in 2023, I believe.
Yes.
Let me go back to the factual background. Yeah, May 17th, 2023.
Yeah.
In response to the board's actions to remove and restrict access to library books based on hostility to the ideas that they express and or their authors or themes.
It's discrimination. Let's just call it what it is. It's discrimination.
So we're talking about books like Toni Morrison's books, or is there a list
with a point of view or by authors who belong to the alphabet mafia.
Yes.
Or authors of color, or stories about people of color.
Well, the argument is that the board's restrictions and removals have disproportionately targeted books by or about people of color and or LGBTQ plus people.
Yes.
I mean, that's the allegation. Not a lot has been done to dispute that allegation. The board's response is essentially, well, it has such sexual content in it, and so we're removing it.
Well, that's a Hail Mary based on a Florida statute that was passed after the cause of action was created or existed in this case, right? So originally, I believe the statement of fact says that the Escambia County School Board started pulling all of these books and banning them or restricting access to them. And after that process started, a new state law in Florida was passed specific to books with sexual content in them. Right. And the process for conducting a review of those books once they're challenged. So it's kind of a layered cause of action here insofar as a collection of books, about 150 of them, right, are at issue here, were originally pulled and banned or restricted. And then now the question is, first and foremost, is that a First Amendment violation? And secondly, does the Florida statute that has been passed since this lawsuit was filed give the school board the right to continue banning a smaller collection of the books that are in question based on sexual content.
Right.
And is the board in violation of the statute for not following the review policy? Because allegedly they have done nothing to review the books that have been banned.
That's the biggest issue of the amended complaint that was just recently filed 14 days ago.
That's right.
And the plaintiffs are alleging that the school board has essentially, and the school district has done nothing in the review process, that it's just a stalemate, that they're just sitting on this and they've made no actionable,
Yeah.
movement towards the review process of any of these books to either, officially ban them or to put them back on the shelves.
Yeah.
And I will add one thing to what you said is that it's also about age range and age group or grade level for which reading would be inappropriate or unsuitable.
Right.
And that does not, if there is an age range where it's unsuitable, that doesn't mean that the book is taken out of the library entirely. It simply means that that age range isn't allowed to check it out.
Right.
So, and that would make sense. There are certain books that might not be appropriate for a first grader, right?
Of course.
I mean, I think we all reasonable people can realize that certain books shouldn't, parents also should have the ability to say, I want my kid reading that. I don't want my kid reading that.
Absolutely.
Especially at, a certain age.
Absolutely.
That's fine. The problem is when parents are saying, I don't want your kid reading that.
That's right.
That's the issue.
Mm-hmm.
And kids read. Kids are, if you've ever been around them.
Raise your hand if you were ever a kid who read age inappropriate material. Yeah. Like, come on now.
Right.
If you've been a reader, chances are at some point you were reading above your age and maturity levels. Especially,
Correct.
Those of us who were raised by less involved parents, right?
And that's what I was going to say. It varies by child, right?
Yeah.
Some children may be able to handle more mature content.
Sure.
Some children might not be able to handle more mature content.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, the ones that are not able to handle more mature content aren't also actively seeking it out.
True.
So let's be honest there. I was a very voracious reader. I always read above my age level. I was reading in the crib when my brother was napping. Like, my mom likes to tell this story.
It's a sweet story.
I never napped as a toddler and whatnot. Apparently, I didn't need it, but my brother needed it. And so my mom would put us both down and she would just put some books in with me and I would sit there and read while my brother slept. And that has been indicative of our lives. But I will just say,
the ultimate foreshadowing.
Yeah, the ultimate foreshadowing. But truly, so, kids are different. Mm-hmm. Kids are different. And let me tell you, my brother was not actively seeking out books that were above his age range.
Right.
It just wasn't something that interested him. So, you're dealing with kids with different levels here.
Sure.
And who should be deciding that, right? The government just putting a blanket statement over any book? Or maybe the people who are actually actively involved in that child's life can determine that, their guardians,
right?
Perhaps.
Well, and does a public school board have the authority to restrict the content that's available to all students?
Right.
Based on viewpoint discrimination or content discrimination. Probably not viewpoint, maybe content. I don't know. They're litigating it, right? We'll find out what the judges in the Northern District of Florida have to say, and maybe eventually the 11th Circuit, and maybe after that SCOTUS. But do you as a parent have the right to say, take that book out of the school completely? I don't want my child or anybody else's child, regardless of their level of maturity, or their parents' rights to allow them to have access to things that they consent to their children accessing.
Mm-hmm.
You making those decisions for other people, for your friends and neighbors?
Yeah. Are we doing that? Well, the other
I mean,
we
yeah, they are doing
are
that
doing that.
all over Florida. That's the whole
Right.
point.
Well, the way that the board interpreted the bill,
Hmm.
the plaintiff also argues that it's that they did so in an unnecessarily burdensome way.
Yeah.
That the way that they interpreted the bill was that they required a preemptive review of every single book
Yes.
in the county public school library
Right.
to determine if the book contains descriptions or depictions of sexual conduct as defined by Florida law.
Hmm.
That is wild. That is why I don't know if people remember, but you saw all books were being removed from circulation.
Yes.
That's why they did that, because of
Yep.
the interpretation,
Yes.
um, which is just absolutely what. Think about this logistically. What a process! You are taking every single book. We're thousands of
Hmm.
books.
Yeah.
Who's reading them? Who's going through? Now you have come down to a subjective interpretation,
Right.
because if we're just going by words alone, that's so many books, right? Like, and what words that are we putting together? Is it make love? Is that inappropriate? Are we talking about
Right.
only descriptive on page action?
Right.
Do we know that, so that
Do we consider biological and medically appropriate descriptions of body parts or of the myriad of ways the body can be used in sexual situations to
yes.
also qualify for censorship and banning here? You know,
And
and
is it
I
the
mean, of course,
person's
the
interpretation?
answer there is yes, right? Like in
Yeah.
terms of what has actually been carried out.
And it ends up being, I'll tell you how it ends up being. It ends up being the person's interpretation
Hmm.
of that book who reads the book. That
Yep.
person is likely, and that's what's been happening, coming into it with a bias already,
Right.
who is like missile actively seeking out
Hmm.
to ban books. So they're not coming into it with an objective perspective of this one's right, this
Right.
one's out, whatever. They're
Yep.
going in trying to seek to eliminate. So there's a level of confirmation bias that is going
Yes.
on by the person or persons who are reading these books.
Yeah.
And are they really reading them for the content? Are they just looking for words that they don't like? And that's really what the lawsuit's about. Let's be
Yeah.
honest. I mean, because that what has happened is that the books that are being not put back on the circulation shelves, if they even do a review, are overwhelmingly books about people of color or by people of color or
Hmm.
about the LGBT community or by people from the LGBT that have LGBTQ themes.
Right.
And that is not coincidental. That's the argument. And I don't it is a wild, wild, twisty road to get around saying that it is somehow coincidental,
Yeah.
in my honest opinion.
It's a racist projection of cultural superiority based on a specific religious worldview.
Correct.
Period.
So this lawsuit, it's a big one. I mean, because here's the thing, if there's a precedent set in one school district,
Yeah,
we know from our history other places will use it as a model.
of course.
So they'll say, "Oh, look, it was done there. This is what
But
happened."
that's the entire point of return it to the states.
Correct. Yeah.
It's a
So,
50 state lab experiment on what you can and can't do in various places and what the people in your community and in your geographic distinct location will and won't tolerate. 100%.
yeah. And so they try it in these small counties where they think they
Hmm.
can get away with it.
Well, I mean, Escambia is not really all that small. They just,
Well, in a smaller test case compared to,
sure.
doing it in multiple places at once.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is how they do it. They try it in these one singular circumstances. Yeah,
Yeah.
Escambia is not like that small of a county or
No.
anything
This
like
is the city of
that.
Pensacola. There's a naval air station there. There's a lot of people in Escambia County.
A lot of people.
It's a big public school system. It's not the biggest one in Florida, but it's probably moderate size compared to.
Hmm.
But yeah,
I'm sure
that's
anything compared to up here, where I
well.
Let's be honest.
or where I currently reside as well. But yeah, I mean, it's small in from the perspective that it's a single case, right? It's a single
Yes, that's what I
jurisdiction.
meant.
It's a single school board. Yeah, we're
Right.
not consolidating multiple causes of action across the state here.
Yeah.
Not that this isn't happening in other locations. This is just
Correct.
this is just the situation where the lawyers were like, "Yep, this is the one we're going to take on and tackle. This is the case." And lawyers do that on both sides.
Oh, yeah.
Test cases exist for a reason.
Absolutely. I mean, we could talk about some certain test cases that happened that went all the way up to the Supreme Court that were hypothetical situations that I wanted to rip my law degree off the wall and throw out the window and set it on fire because literally one of the first things you learn in law school is that hypothetical circumstances don't get to the Supreme Court.
It's true.
That they throw out hypothetical circumstances because unless there's a real harm that has occurred, we're not in the business of speculating.
Unless you are in Texas,
Where was that graphic design lady?
Western District of Texas.
I don't
know. You can sometimes get into the federal court system without standing. Eventually, a district court may tell you that you don't have standing, but
yeah. Right. But so these situations where harm has actually occurred.
Yes.
That is when the facts are there. That's nice for attorneys when you don't have to, argue on hypotheticals because it can actually go somewhere if you don't get the actual result that you're hoping for.
Right.
And in my opinion, the correct result, but my opinion. But yeah, we're going to watch this case. We're going to go through the arguments. It's layered. We wanted to talk about it today and just sort of bring up the general facts as to what's going on and let you know that for the next, couple episodes, we're going to dive into some book banning.
Yeah.
And talk about what's happening in different locations.
Mm-hmm.
This
give you the lay of the land on this case, and then maybe also talk about a few other places in Florida and elsewhere where this has been a recurring theme for a handful of years now.
Right, because it's very concerning. And even if, the election doesn't change things, right, we're still going to have these, even if it doesn't go downward into further abyss after this election, this presidential election, we're still going to have these challenges on the local level. The local level is still going to have these levels of challenges. So
this is why it's so important to pay attention to local politics and to be plugged into what's going on in your community and to attend. If you pay taxes or have a child in public schools in your area, to attend school board meetings and to find out what's going on. And I mean, if you support it, fine. I mean, that's your prerogative. You're entitled to your opinion. If the school board banning books is right up your alley, why are you listening to Heather?
Why are you listening to us?
But also, just being involved locally and paying attention to what's happening.
These types
there just isn't a way for it to trickle down from the very top. Like, federal elections are great. They're exciting. It's what you see on social media and the news and everything, right? But and everybody's got an opinion, and you know what they say about opinions.
Yep.
But beyond that, it's what's happening in your own backyard that's probably the most important to you and your family.
All politics are local.
That's
and
right.
So you need to pay attention to what's going on locally.
Yeah.
And I guess my point being is these cases are not going away. Types of things like this, we're going to continue to deal with this type of push and pull. There's not going to be some sort of panacea that comes all over the country and just eases everybody into being respectful and civil with one another.
Not unless that superior worldview, that superior cultural worldview dies its dying breath and disappears, which is not likely to happen. So
very unlikely. So we need to continue to look at these cases and see what to look out for.
Mm-hmm.
How are these cases even getting how are these laws getting passed? What's the buzzwords? What are people saying? How are
Right.
they convincing people, right? So we need to dive into this. It's very relevant to publishing because guess what? If they're banning their books, they might be banning your books next.
Listen, if you've got excessive or any adult content, and it doesn't even have to be
Mhm.
sex, just violence, right?
Yeah,
Or you write about characters who are not in the
yeah,
culturally superior group,
yeah,
right? Like if your characters are minorities or are people of non-traditional, and I'm using air quotes here because whose tradition are we even applying here?
right.
Identities, right? Like, I
The
mean,
quote unquote nuclear family, if you don't have that,
yes.
antiquated nuclear family vision in your
Hmm.
books, is that going to be something
Yeah.
that is,
It's a culture war,
right?
unfortunately. And it could, if unchecked, hurt a lot of people,
And it's
especially in
very
publishing.
right. I mean, it's affected public libraries as well, not just school libraries. So
Absolutely.
that's something that we want to talk about as well, because
Hmm.
public community libraries are being affected, and for accessibility to information,
Yeah,
that is ah
I know.
the library is the heart of the community.
And there is a backlash to that as well. I live in, as far as I know, the only state in the union now that has legislated protections against public library content exclusions and book bans.
Oh wow,
If public library is found to be banning books from its collection, it is ineligible for state funding here in Illinois.
that's amazing. I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah, it was a recent development. But
Yeah,
yeah, so it's not bleak everywhere, but
it's
you
not.
got you got to know what's happening.
Well, and I think especially in states that are quote unquote considered safe, right? Like I live in Vermont. People consider Vermont a quote unquote safe state.
For
And
for books or just for like
for
intellectual ideas and values.
both, both. It's a state, we were one of the first, if not the first state, to put the constitutional amendment in for reproductive rights in our
Yeah.
state constitution. We've been considered, we have a lot of laws on the books that protect those, transgender members of our community and
Hmm.
other groups that are
Marginalized.
oftentimes
Yeah.
marginalized. Yeah. So, we as a state are very tolerant and very open to civil discourse. This is the place, though. I'm telling you, I have never had such civil discourse in my entire life up here. People are extremely respectful of one another, even when they don't agree with each other.
Yeah.
It is a wild, weird. When you come from a different place where that did not
Yeah.
happen, it is jarring. But also, we need to remember, even in places that are like that, it may not always stay like that, right?
Right.
And so you have to safeguard to ensure that your communities are like that. You can't just get complacent and say, "Oh, well, it's not like that here, so it's fine."
Yeah.
It could be like that here
Well,
in 10
all
years.
it has to do is come to your doorstep, and
Right,
then it's close enough that it's a possibility. You can say that'll never happen here. We're not like that. But
right,
the whole point of what's happening behind the scenes with all of this is to literally spread it as far and wide as possible on
correct.
the local level to ensure that the local policies, procedures, and practices identify more with one specific agenda that will absolutely restrict what you have access to
Yeah.
in your public libraries.
So we are trying to bring awareness to this and talk
Mhm.
about this case because it is an interesting case. And the amended complaint that was just filed in 14 days ago, as I said, the specific reason it was being amended is because of the delay in action by the board to review those books. As we were
Yeah,
talking about the review process. And the argument is essentially that there has just been no movement there. And
right.
it's a a stonewalling on purpose.
Yeah.
It's an intentional stonewalling.
The new statute in the state of Florida, combined with the discovery process that brought to light the fact that the book review was not taking place at all, has led to the need for the complaint to be amended. So that's the whole shebang there procedurally.
Yeah. So we'll get into it a little bit more. It's, it's a little convoluted, right? So we don't want to get too much in the weeds of the convolution, but I think it's important to know what's going on. What are they fighting about? Just like in some of these other lawsuits that we've talked about, where the reason that the lawsuit was filed is not really what they're fighting about in the lawsuit. Mm-hmm. It's always funny how that happens, right? Yeah. But it's important to know how these things are going through the courts. So we're
not here to teach a CLE on First Amendment law, but we are definitely here to rep your right to read or write what you want to read or write.
Exactly.
It's fundamental.
Absolutely. So until next time, come back and we will get into it. Go read a book. Go read a banned book.
Read a banned book.
Read a banned book and support literacy in your community.
Absolutely.
So, we'll talk soon.